The policy brief is clear. COVID-19 is unlikely to leave Africa unscathed. But that's not to say African governments in the main haven't done a good job, despite all the underlying conditions faced by the region.
Is this, SG, a case of African governments doing a better job than others?
Largely so. I do believe I have a lot of admiration for what's happening in Africa today. If we just think back, the forecasts that were made just 1 month ago would indicate that we should now have in Africa a pandemic spreading like bushfire everywhere with hundreds of thousands, millions of people infected. And the truth is that largely because of very strong prevention measures by governments and societies, and from the very beginning, sometimes without any case or with just 1 or 2 cases, very strong measures of prevention were taken. And this is a lesson that should be seen by countries, namely in the developed world, that acted much later.
Secretary General, what have you made?
We asked him to weigh in on South Africa's stringent lockdown and the economic stresses and political fallout it has engendered.
I think those measures were necessary because the numbers were becoming worrying. I think those measures were necessary, and I understand because I'm suffering to a certain extent similar measures. I'm far from my family. I can see them. I am more or less in a kind of a semi-lockdown, even if so I can understand sometimes the frustration of the people. But one thing is clear: if there is no real contradiction between the measures that are taken to prevent the disease and the economic recovery. Because if we let the disease spread, there is no economic recovery that is possible.
Guterres highlighted the need for massive support towards the continent and the goal of a global package worth at least $200 billion to bolster Africa's capacity at a level commensurate to what is being seen in richer nations. He said the UN's development agenda was being negatively impacted by the pandemic, but urged governments to find ways to build back better and greener, while warning that addressing inequality during the recovery would be key. And on the failure of the Security Council, particularly the major power brokers, to pass a resolution to back his call for a global ceasefire as Africa seeks to silence the guns by the year's end.
It is obvious that we are in a situation in which that division is not allowing for the Council to come together and to be able to address in unity and with sufficiently strength many of the crisis situations we have in the world. And the same division is causing also difficulties in creating a global coordinated response to COVID-19.
Despite being unable to give an assurance on the equitable access to a future vaccine, the UN chief did pledge to do everything in his power to ensure that was the case.
Whoever discovers the vaccine should, of course, be paid. The costs should be covered, but the patent should be free. And anybody could be able to manufacture it anywhere in the world in order for the access to be universal, and not only universal, but at a cost that could be affordable for any society in the international community. If we don't do things like that, if you make it a commercial venture like any other, we risk a situation in which only the rich of the rich countries will have access to the vaccine, and that is politically and morally totally unacceptable.
As the UN vows to stand by Africa during both the immediate and longer-term manifestations of the COVID-19 threat. Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.